Okay, I am going to get us kicked off. Welcome, everybody. It is March 7th, 2024. This is a meeting of Envision Eugene Technical Advisory Committee, EETAC. We've got a number of things on our agenda today. We'll start with the review of the agenda. If there's anything to add or discuss, I'll just kind of wait for hands. All right, I'm going to start with the approval of the February 1st Zoom meeting summary. If you've all had a chance to review that.
I move to approve the Zoom minutes.
I second.
Wonderful. Any further discussion? Okay, all of those in favor, go ahead and give me a... All right, I see a unanimous vote there by the ETAC members.
Sorry, can you put your hands up again since I'm taking notes, which I'm not as efficient at? Second. And everyone here. Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Heather. All right, I'm going to look at the agenda here, any public comment received by staff. So I just want to check in with you all if there's been public comment on any of our items. All right, easy. So if you're ready, Heather, I can kick it to you to go over the growth monitoring annual report data.
Yeah, that was really fast. Okay.
I'm getting us out.
Well, we're doing it. Okay. So first, let's see. 1 second here. Let me pull this up. Okay, sorry about that. Let's see if I can get you all back on my screen here. There we go. All right. So we're going to start out with population and jobs. We were going to talk about that last time, but we ran out of time. The main things that rather than kind of going through the whole thing, I wanted to point out essentially what are the differences from last time, and then some new information that we got from Portland State University, who does our population estimates and our forecast, and just get your hit on this information. So first of all, just starting with what is different from the last annual report. And so the chart down here is showing that we are growing at, when we added another year in, we're growing at 1% over the monitoring period. And that went down from last year's annual report. It was 1.2% over the monitoring period. Still faster than the 0.9, slightly faster than the 0.9. But it's the fact that it's going down is actually in line with the most recent population forecast. We haven't gotten a new one since the last time we reported this, but it was for the 2020 to 2040 period. We get a new forecast every 4 years, so we just our time hasn't come up on the cycle yet. But it was already showing us slowing down, and that is actually what has been happening. And you may have heard, this is kind of a side note, but you may have heard that I think it was last year was the first time that deaths outpaced births. And so our growth last year was, at the state level, I think was, attributed to net in-migration from elsewhere, outside of Oregon. And I think they had anticipated that wasn't gonna happen, that, where deaths would outpace births. They didn't think that was gonna happen for another couple of years, but it happened this last year. So that was actually, kind of a big deal in the population world. But the thing I wanted to show you is that, so as you know, this estimate that we're putting into this orange bar for our certified population forecast is the certified estimate from Portland State that we get every December. So they certify it December 15th. They give you a preliminary estimate in July for that year, and then they certify it and bring it a little bit more up to date by the end of the year in December. And when I was looking at the data that was, when I was looking at the estimate from last year, or for this year, from last year for this year's report, I noticed that they had revised the estimate for previous years. And I was like, well, I knew that they did that, but I was surprised at how much it had been revised. And so I just put together a bit of a spreadsheet to show you what I found. And I think I know what I want to do with it, but I just wanted to talk to you all about it. So column D, so these are our, column B is our, can you read that? Is that okay? So, okay. Column B is the year of the estimate, and then column D is what you're seeing the growth rate that is calculated in Tableau, our platform that we're using. So that's what's in the charts and is that December certified estimate out to the city limits. When I was looking at the one for 2023, it compared the 2023 certified estimate to the previous year's estimate, and the estimate was not this. It was not 178,259. It was 175. 377. So it actually went down quite a bit. And I've known that they revised their estimates, but it's not usually been this notable. It's just been like a little bit, so I haven't really worried about it. So then I went back and said, okay, what's going on here? And so I went back and looked at all of the certified estimates of the most recent years, and then the following year, doing the same thing of like, well, was there a revised estimate and what was it? And so that's what you're seeing here. So in 2020, the certified estimate in December was 173,620. And then when they revised it, and it looks like they're always revising it in April. So it would have been April of 2021. They revised it to 176,873. And in this case, that was actually much closer, although weirdly not the same, as what the 2020 census came out as for Eugene, which is 176,654. Anyway, so I did that for the most recent years and calculated the difference. And the total difference since 2020 is a difference of 2,702 more than we are currently assuming with these numbers. And I anticipate that this April will get another revised estimate for this 2023 number. So that raised a flag for me because we mostly have not been going back and revising historical data. So sometimes the yearly American Community Survey data changes we're not going back and re-warehousing that and re-correcting it because it's just too much to kind of do on an annual basis. But for the population, that is so fundamental to what we're tracking. And building permit data is another one. We do go back and make changes when we see errors and things like that. So this one feels like one where we should probably go back and update our charts to use the new revised estimate. And so I checked with PSU. They said, yeah, every April we relook at the estimate from the previous year and we revise it. You're right. The last couple years it has been significant. It's not usually that much of a difference. But a lot of it had to do with COVID and some other things like that. And so they do anticipate that while they'll revise it every year, these last couple of years have been kind of an anomaly, at least since they've been doing this. So I talked to Beth. Oh, the other thing I confirmed with PSU is that I said, well, when you do your forecast for us, what is the historical estimates that you use for over the years? Do you use the certified estimate? Because they were pretty adamant that they don't change the certified estimate. They just have a revised estimate. Or do you use the revised estimate? And they said they'll use the revised estimate. And since that's what we're trying to compare against is what our growth rate has been compared to our adopted forecast and any new forecast that's coming out. And their forecasts are going to be based on these revised estimates. I think we need to update our charts to include the revised numbers. So we haven't done that yet. But I just wanted to tell you that that is what I'm thinking. And I did check with Beth, our consultant, and she agreed with that. She said that a lot of times the certified estimate is what is used for things like federal funding, because the federal government wants like, what is your certified estimate, right? And so but for our purposes, we're doing long range planning. We're looking at, population projections. And so she agreed that if PSU has a revised number, we should probably use that. She said it would be fine if we wanted to just always say we're going to use the certified, but she recommended updating our charts. So unless anyone has any concerns with that, that's what I'd like to do.
Mark, I saw your hand. Go ahead.
I'm a little bit confused by the term estimate as opposed to actual count. I mean, one can revise an estimate from 2 years ago. Is it still an estimate? And what's the revision based on? I mean, one could actually count and get a number, I would think, or claim to have a number. And thus the term estimate being used to talk about 2 years ago seems like a strange term to apply.
Yeah, so that's their terminology. So feel free to take that up with them. But I think it's kind of like how even when you have a census, you really don't get everybody. I mean, you cannot say you have 100% of everybody documented. It's just not a reality. And so I think that is why they call it an estimate, because they cannot guarantee that they got everyone in the state of Oregon. The reason that they revise it in April is because they are able to use tax information that they don't have until April when all the taxes are filed, about out migration. So that was that's why they have to wait till April to give a revised estimate. That's what they call it, a revised estimate.
Well, okay, I would think they could call it, this is our estimated number of people present plus or minus X, owing to these issues or something like that. But that's kind of a quibble at this point.
Yeah, it's not, I mean, it's not for me to tell them what they should call it. I'm just using the language that they put in their reports.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the question.
John, I see your hand.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm in favor of using the revised estimate going forward. And one of the reasons for that is, when we adopted the GB the last time, there was a bunch of controversy over which estimate to use because we were basing it on one, and then a revised estimate came in. Now, I know that's not the exact same thing here, but if we say that we're using the most up-to-date estimate in all of our calculations, I think that lends credibility to the numbers so that somebody can't say, well, PSU said in April this number and it's different. So I'm all in favor of using the revised estimates whenever possible.
Yeah, anyone else want to chime in? I agree. And it'd be nice if we could call it like approximation or something, but I understand it's their language, not ours, but I think that's actually what it is it's like, it's a, it's not, it's meant to mean that it's not an exact number, but it is a more certain number than just kind of like a guess. So, yeah. But I do.
But one of the numbers, as I understand that from what you're telling us, is a projection, and the other one is an estimated actual number.
No, these numbers here are all estimated actual numbers. What I was saying about the forecast or the projection is that when they do their 20-year forecast for us, that's based on historical data and then new information. And so I was asking them, what historical population numbers are you going to use when you do your forecasting? And I said, are you going to use the certified or are you going to use these new revised estimates? And they said the revised estimates. And so then that made me think, okay, well, then we should probably be referring to those as well. Sorry, sorry that wasn't clear.
All right. Any other?
Okay. Great, thank you. Yeah, it's a funky thing. And so I think what I'm gonna do is we'll get those numbers into the charts through basically 2022. We should be getting a revised 2023 population estimate this April, but I'd like to hold off on importing that because our annual report is for data that came out in 2023. And this will be coming out in 2024. So it's a little bit awkward because it's 2023 data, but it's like you have to kind of stop somewhere as far as when the cutoff is for putting new data in the report. So I just feel like it's cleaner to not import that yet. But it will be, all of this will be used, again, will be used for a new population forecast when we get that. Okay, great. Thank you for that. So like I said, we don't have a new forecast yet, so there really isn't any new information. I had added this paragraph here about the decennial census compared to Eugene's population estimate, but this was before I had gotten all this information about the revised estimates from PSU. So the 2020 right here again, so that paragraph talks about 173,620 compared to 176,654, but PSU actually has revised their estimate, so it's a lot closer to the census, which is good. Again, I have no idea why it's not exactly the same. There's some footnotes there and interesting commentary about that in some of the articles, but but anyway, so I'll revise this paragraph based on what we just talked about. So for jobs, we do have a new forecast. I'll get to that in a minute. We have not updated the job data for Eugene since the comprehensive report. And just a reminder of why that is. That's because the Lane County job data comes out every year, but then it has to be, we have to pay LCOG, Lane Council of Governments, to take that jobs data and allocate it to just what's the jobs that are in Eugene's urban growth boundary and not in Springfield or other parts of Lane County. And so it doesn't really make sense financially for us to do that every year. So we have not done that, but LCOG is in the process of doing that for us for the Urban Growth Strategies project. And so we will incorporate that into growth monitoring. So we're just waiting for that data to be available. And so it will be in the next report. However, like I said, there has been new jobs data for Lane County. So we have 2022 data. And I just compared it to 2020 instead of last year's data for Lane County, just because that's what we have for Eugene. But you can see it's still on the incline, which is great. I believe though that the rate was a little bit slower than it was. I kind of skipped over that part, apologies. Yeah, so OED issued a new forecast for Lane County in December of 2023. And it shows a projected growth rate for the county of 0.9% for 2022 to 2032, so that 10-year. And that is down from the forecast that they did for Lane County in February of 2023, which was 1.2%. So it has been slowing, and that has been the projection. But on the other hand, that we have seen more jobs. It's still been growing, which is good, and getting pretty close to where we were. You know, we're at 154,214, and in 2018 we were at 156,711. So pretty close to where we were before the pandemic.
Heather, can I ask a question about it?
Yeah.
I'm just curious. I know there's all kinds of ways that they crunch the data, but I'm curious about where the projections come, or if that's what that means. If these are estimates, just similar to what we were just talking about with the populations, or if this is actually just projections and what it's based on.
Yeah, these are actual numbers.
Okay.
So these are actual Lane County numbers. The forecast is from the state does the forecast as well. It's the Oregon Employment Department, and they do a forecast. So they're kind of doing the same thing that PSU is doing, of saying, okay, what's the number that we have right now? And instead of by age groups, it's by job sectors. And then what is the forecast for the next however long? And it's just that OED's forecast for jobs is only for 10 years for the county. Yeah. And they are, I believe, if I remember correctly, I didn't look back at my notes on this. I think that they are trying to do a forecast for cities. But we just haven't gotten one for a while.
Okay. Phil, I see your hand.
Yeah, first, sorry, I was late joining the call. Are Is there any thought or plan, or are you just going to wait to see if the policymakers even ask you for it, of figures that would put this in context of beyond just the county and beyond just the city? I just see stats that come across the transom from Henry Fields' department showing kind of where, monthly, kind of where the growth is in employment. And there's probably half a dozen cities that are well above Eugene with regularity. So we haven't been busting our buttons and returning to, the healthiest of employment sectors, at least relative to some of our peer cities across the state.
Yeah, we've got some of that information, I think, in the comprehensive report at the state level, but we haven't done it for other cities. We have done other city comparison to other nearby cities for population growth, population estimate and population growth, but we didn't do it for jobs. I think that with the new urban growth strategies project, we're going to get a whole bunch of new information about jobs, population, a bunch of stuff. And I think that once we, this is why this is a program, right? Is that once we get all of that information, we're going to have to reassess the charts that we have and see if there's additional data that we should be bringing in. Yeah. And it's a fine line, because I know that there's going to be additional stuff, and it takes time to do that. But we might be able to do it in like a table format or something that's a little bit quicker, like we did for population growth rate. It's just a table with other cities in Eugene. So we could do something like that probably. Yeah, and then we just need to figure out what cities. So it'll be interesting to see what comes out of the economic opportunities analysis that we're starting this year and that you all will be looking at. And then we'll then take that information and incorporate it into the growth monitoring program. So yeah, that's a good flag though. It's a good shot over the bow that we're going to need to look at that.
Well, thanks. I just heads up, you may be getting questions to that effect, and there's data sets that are right there available for you to draw from. So that's good.
Yeah, and speaking of Henry Fields, I just watched, and Counselor Ye was there in person with Henry Fields and City of Eugene staff, Amphi Field, and they did a great presentation to City Council on February 12th. I think it was at their work session on February 12th. And I was pleased to see that a lot of the data that Henry Fields shared was actually what we're showing in growth monitoring. I was like, oh, that makes me feel good. I mean, it's their data. We're just putting it into charts, but we're picking the right things to comment on. So I thought that was really good. And then they go a little bit deeper into what's going on in Eugene specifically that is a bit outside of growth monitoring, but will help inform the policy discussion. So if you're interested, it was really good. Yeah, and then so on that note, there was any other hands. Okay, on that note, we've got the last two pieces: unemployment rate and then average annual wage or pay. And so the unemployment rate has been trending down, especially since 2011. It is a little bit up from when we last reported it in at 4.7. And then average annual wage is up, but it's still kind of to your point, Phil. It's still lower, I believe, than Oregon. And I think that is consistent. That has been consistent, right? And that's one of the things they talked about at the work session that was reinforced, is that we have consistently had a lower average rate. Yeah, so as reported last year in 2016, Eugene's average wages were 16% less than Oregon's in 2020, because that was our last Eugene specific wage data. It was 17% gap difference, but that's, you know, that probably hasn't changed much. Yeah, so this is kind of just a touch base on these metrics. And like I said, I think we'll have new metrics and some new things to talk about once we get through the EOA and how we want to track things differently or report on things differently.
Okay.
Kind of unsatisfactory, but I appreciate all of your guidance on the population number, and we'll update that, and in the report when it comes to you, we'll know what part was updated. And then I can kick it over to Elena unless there's any more questions about that.
Elena, we cannot hear you. But we can tell what you're thinking. Yes, 1 sec. Okay, I can translate that.
You should let me watch because I can lip read really, really well.
Okay. Okay, can you guys hear me over here?
Can.
Yes. Okay, I'm on a different computer. You can't see me on here. I'm on a different computer that doesn't have all my stuff up exactly, but I'm going to do my best here.
Elena, do you want me to share my screen?
No, I think I have, let's see. It didn't have Chrome installed, so I was like, I have to use Microsoft Edge. Okay. I think that I have it pulled up here and you can see it.
Yep.
All right. Yay. I'm going to come back up to the comparison table, I think at the end, and kind of start with diving into just some of the straight numbers. So first we have median household income. There was a 57% increase between 2012 at 39,000 and 2022 or 61,000, and a 3% increase between 2021 and 2022. So you can see in the chart here, we've included 2012 and then the most recent year, and most recent year before that. So 21 and 2022, and then also included Lane County and Oregon. Just gonna keep going if there's no comments about that. And then next we have median sales price by housing type, and a reminder that this is ARLID data. Let's see. The median sales price for single unit detached dwellings went from 205,000 in 2012 to 475,000 in 2023, which is an increase of 132%. I did want to note, I'll show this on the charts. Did want to note that there were some changes in the sales price of 5 or more dwellings, and I'm not entirely sure why, so I need to do a little bit more background info digging into some of the ARLA data, but I think it's most likely due to some of their cleanup, and sometimes they reassign that housing type of the sale, which is just going to change some of the historical data along the way. And I think I saw Sue's hand pop up.
Yeah, go ahead, Sue.
I don't know if I'm the only one. When I looked at this page, I could not differentiate between the colors very well.
Okay.
It's so hard with those different colors of oranges and yellow. I'm just wondering, I mean, this was the only one I really noticed it on, but it stood out to me as one that was being very hard to kind of glance and get a feeling about it. So if there's some way to put some different colors in there to make it more readable.
I think what might also be helpful for this chart, and I kind of went back and forth on it, and I think I did the same thing last year, but if you take out the 5+ dwellings, since they're so much higher than all the other lines, and have that on its own chart, and then have all the others on their own chart, that will also help with just the lines aren't going to be so close together, and you will be able, I think, to tell the colors apart better. In terms of the actual colors themselves, there's been so many conversations along the way. And so, but Heather and I can regroup on what our options might be there.
Thank you. Hey, Phil, you had your hand up. I didn't know if you want to pass on.
Elena just said exactly what I was going to suggest. Okay. Thank you.
I can definitely do that in the report. I think that will make the other lines stand out for sure. All right, then on to median gross rent, which has increased 55% over the monitoring period from $831 in 2012 to $1,287 in 2022. And then just even between 2021 and 2022, that increased by $105, which is an additional 9%. And
Really quick, can I ask a question about that? So you said that home prices went up by what, 130 something?
175,
100
32.
132, but rents only went up by 50. Go back, sorry.
55.
132 and only went up by 55. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah, and you can, and then I'll go back to the table at the end too, where you can kind of see a little better in some of those comparisons.
Okay.
But this is the median gross rent table. Again, chose to do 2012, 2021, 2022 for Eugene, Lane County, and Oregon.
Hang on, I've got this in my way.
And
So, okay, that is
Yeah.
also very, I'm just noticing the differences, the increases for Eugene is lower on the home prices, but with rents, it's a little bit more comparable to Oregon, and then it's actually higher than Lane County, but I think that makes sense. John, I see your hand.
Yeah. So this was a real interesting chart for me. And one of the things that I took away from it was I went back and looked at so if you look at home prices went up 132%. Well, that was over a 10-year period. So I say, okay, that's 13%. Wages went up 5.5% over 10 years on a yearly basis, right? That's why I'm breaking it down to a yearly basis. Rent went up by 5.5% on a yearly basis. And I mean, I'm just doing quick, matchbook calculations here. And home prices went up 13% over 10 years. If you take 132% divided by 10 years, that's 13% a year. So it was, in that way, it was really, I don't know if there's a way to put that into the thing. We have year to date next to each other, but when you just throw in that home prices went up 132% in the period, that's kind of a shocking number. And when you say rent prices went up 55% over the period, people see those large numbers and they say, oh my gosh, rent prices have gone up 55%. Well, that's over 10 years. They've gone up 5%. They've gone up 5% each year over the 10-year period. The last year they went up 9%. Question being, is that because of some of the Policies, this is just me thinking, not as far as what needs to go in the report, but is that
Mhm.
because of some of the policies that were enacted that made it a cap that you can only raise it 10%, so people are starting to do that. I see these big numbers for the 10-year ones, and they're scary numbers, but when you do year to year, it's a more realistic type of thing. Our income has been going up 5%. Our rents have been going up 5%. Home prices obviously have been going up higher than all of that, but I don't know. I just wanted to make that observation that I had with these charts.
Yeah, I think, and I don't know, I guess, it's, I think in the comprehensive report, we did go into a little bit more detail over the like average annual increase was X. And we have been trying to keep the annual report pretty high level. But that probably wouldn't be too hard to add some of that additional detail around, especially some of the housing costs information. So I think that is something that I could add into the annual report as well.
And we might be able to do, just real quick, we might be able to do it in a table format, so that it is more easy to update instead of having to write it out, because it's a lot. Especially if you were to kind of try to compare, which I think we do at some point, housing costs to rent costs to income, like having that in a table with over the period versus annually might be helpful.
And I'm not necessarily saying change the thing. It was just an observation that I made. And I just wanted to bring it to this group because this group definitely can see things.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Sue and then Phil.
So I think John's point is really an interesting one, because if you do an annual average, you sort of miss the point that is probably the most important one for the policymakers to get, which is, when are the years when the changes were most significant, and how does that relate to policies that were actually implemented? So I think there's sort of, there's an advantage to do it one way and a disadvantage, and then there's an advantage and a disadvantage to doing it another way. And I'm not sure there's any really good answer, but I would hope that, because we're not a policy group, I would hope that the policymakers are doing the breakdown so that they can see. So for instance, if it went up 9% last year, I mean, I know as a small property owner, we have 4 rentals that I manage. I know that many people in my situation, when the new policies were implemented, the first thing they did was raise the rent when they might not have otherwise. But it's because they thought, we're going to be limited, we better do it now. So I think, your point is a good one, John. I'm not sure that there's really a good way to do that is helpful to the public who might be reading it, but it might be very helpful to the policymakers.
Yeah. Phil?
I was about to say basically the same kind of thing, but I think what ends up happening is just because of these charts, and we've got 2012, 2021, and 2022, we're missing all those intervening years to really see kind of where the needle might have moved and jumped a little bit more dramatically in a given year or couple of years after maybe some sort of intervention. And yeah, you kind of fake yourself out thinking like, oh, it's only 5% a year or something like that. Well, I mean, it was disproportionately high in a couple of years, most recently. And it was, a lot of it was after this big sugar rush in housing prices in 2017 and 18 that prompted the innovation of putting caps on rent increases. Now, as a result, some landlords kind of took advantage of, and as maybe a defensive mechanism, raised rents that full amount. Others didn't, but yeah, I think we're just a little bit hamstrung here by the bandwidth that we have to put all of the data that we need to put in here for Oregon County and city, and for every year. I mean, the page would be too wide. It would be on legal paper. So I
Well,
think, I don't know, you kind of get these questions, I'm sure, again, Heather, that the policymakers will be asking you for more data and you can give it to them at that point. But anyway.
yeah, and Heather can totally jump in also, but I think, you know, we've been saying that the annual report really is meant to be sort of like a report card. Like, this is sort of what changed from last year. If there was any like huge spike that seemed, you know, weird or concerning, we're gonna flag that, and we could add previous year's data to show that big spike. You know, we do have it, and in the comprehensive report, we are including all of those years. I think we included 2012 through 2021 and had all the bars, and then had 3 separate charts for Eugene, Lane County, Oregon. The annual report is meant to be more digestible, more of a postcard, shorter. So that data was, you know, is available. But I think that's sort of where we've landed, is including the last years. And unless, yeah, there is some, you know, there is some benefit to maybe providing more years if we do see some abnormalities pop up. But yeah.
So
I
I
don't
guess,
know.
I guess the question would be, what are the what are the parameters of the abnormality?
Right, sure.
Right? And is that, do you want input from us on that, or is that staff driven?
Right. I don't know, because we're only on year 2 right now. I lost my train of thought. I don't know. Do you have thoughts, Heather?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. We could have, and keep in mind, this is like year-old data, right? So it might not show that spike yet. But what we could do, yeah, like Elena said, we're still trying to figure out what is the right amount of data and years to bring you all. And this is only our 2nd annual report. In the last one, the first annual report, we were able to compare to the comprehensive report, which was, you know, 10 years of data. And so this is the first time where we were going, here's 1 year of new data, and then compared to 1 other year of new data last year. You know what I mean? So I think that's a great question. I mean, I think that is the role of, we should be bringing you like, whoa, we saw weird, just like Elena brought up how there was a change in the 5+ unit building sales. She looked at, you know, she's looking at that and trying to figure out what's going on, because, you know, was something going on then? I mean, that's different. We think that because it was this historical data, something changed. But like, as an example, we are trying to flag those things to bring to you, or bring you enough information to help us flag things that we missed. And so this might be an example where we look at over the period and we bring you that information, but it doesn't necessarily have to go in the annual report if there isn't anything interesting to note. Does that make sense? So we've been trying to like reduce the amount of charts that you're seeing, but maybe we need to expand that a little bit. Even if it's not going in the annual report, that's part of what we're trying to do, is figure out what needs to go in the annual report. So I think I hear what you're saying. I think that makes sense. We'll keep that in mind for the next one, I think.
Thank you.
Since we're moving into the UGB work, and you're gonna get a whole bunch of data, so.
Sue?
Well, I just want to comment that there are already a lot of charts. So I don't think we have a shortage of charts. So I wouldn't want you to feel like you have to fabricate a whole lot more. I mean, I think some of it could be done in general comments and maybe just anecdotally, because personally, when I read these things, I have to really stop and, actually just look at the title again and say, what am I actually looking at? Because it is a ton of information. So I would hate to have you all think that you need to generate a whole lot more charts, when in fact, what we need is maybe just anecdotal information. Just my comment.
Okay. Move on to cost burden households. So total households in both 2012 and 2022, the percentage of households that were cost burden was the same percentage wise at 45%. But obviously the number, well, not obviously, but the number of households that are cost burden has increased. And then in the short term, cost burden households increase from 40% to 45% between 2021 and 2022. So you can see that we have both Eugene and Oregon. So there was a pretty kind of a big jump between 2021 and 2022. And then, like I said, even though 45% in both 2012 and 2022, you can see it, there are more households that are cost burdened now. And then then we also compare renters and owners that are cost burdened. And for renter households here, there was 60% in 2012 and 61% in 2022 versus owner households was 31% in 2012 and is now 27% in 2022. And then we have vacancy rate. And so in 2012, it was 5.1%, and in 2022, it's gone down to 3.7%. And then we know that the vacancy rate in the ACS1 usually has a pretty high margin of error. So I also pulled in a footnote, I also pulled ACS 5-year data, which had a much smaller margin of error, and sort of taking that margin of error into account for the ACS 5-year data, it was between 3.2 and 4.3. So kind of just did a double check on that number. But you see that going down here.
Question, Elena.
Yeah.
Is this just based on units available? Is it I guess my question, let's see. Does this factor in any potential loss of units? If that makes sense.
Don't believe so.
And when I say that, I mean like a house was a rental, and then the owner decided to sell it and it became an ownership to someone else. And they just, you know what I mean? It's like, so that would represent a loss of a rental unit. And so I just didn't know if that was anything we're capturing at all, or if we have data that actually quantifies how many rentals or units of rental units that we have.
We do not. So this is ACS data, and this is vacancy rate for all dwellings. This isn't just rentals.
Okay.
And so it could be, the reason, sort of an overview, it captures this, but the reason we look at vacancy rates is we need units to be vacant for people who are selling their house and finding a rental, or renting and buying a house, and you kind of need that like turnover time
Right.
in between. But yeah, this is, so in terms of rentals, the city does have their the rental I'm blanking on the name. but the what is the name? Do you know, Heather? Rental housing program.
Yep.
And I think that they are trying to move towards getting some better data around rentals in the city. But that's not part of our growth monitoring data, but I mean, I think they do hope to have some better data around rental properties in Eugene over the coming years.
Phil, you had your hand up first, but Heather, if you're trying to answer a question, feel free to.
I was just gonna say, yeah, related to that, that the census does have 10-year by housing unit type. So we do have that in the census, and we are warehousing that data. We haven't been reporting that on the, on the, what do I want to say? The annual report. I think we reported it in the comprehensive report. And we understand that the census is going through some changes in how they're documenting 10-year by housing type, particularly with vacancy rate. And I don't know if that's going to be the same for housing types, just in general, but for vacancy rate, we have had some problems with their new format that they're not collecting data the way that they were before. So we don't know if we're going to be able to get vacancy rate by 10-year type anymore, but we can get housing type by 10-year.
Okay.
Did Phil have a question, or
Well,
No,
that kind of gets to what I was wondering, because this is sort of a blended vacancy rate of houses and apartments,
Mhm.
of houses that will ultimately are maybe not intended to be exclusively rented, but those that might just be in transition of ownership. And I was wondering if you have, you know, again, like Sue, I'm not asking you to make more slides, more graphs. But if somebody asks and you had in your pocket the data that would say, oh, well, the apartment vacancy rate, which you do hear from various other sources, is probably at 3.7% or perhaps even below. And that's sort of that healthy percentage that where renters have a little bit more bargaining power or choices in the marketplace, and we're not there. So, I mean, you have kind of data, I assume, kind of in your pocket somewhere for when the policymakers ask questions beyond kind of this graph, right?
Right. So not annually, we haven't been doing that, or I say we haven't been, this is our second time. The comprehensive report, we did have some, like Sue was mentioning earlier, some anecdotal or contextual information from other sources. Like I can't remember who was it Redfin that we had that information from. The city also does a survey every so often. It's time intensive, but they do a survey of vacancies for apartments. It's not a census, right? So it doesn't do all of the apartments. It's only a certain amount, and then they make some assumptions about that. So I can't remember if we put that in the comprehensive report last time, but the next time they do that, then we'll have that information. And I think they're going to try to keep doing that every so often, so we have that information. And then I think in the comprehensive report, we got rental vacancy rate from Duncan and Brown, a report that they had. So we are trying to supplement, because my understanding is that the vacancy rate by 10-year in the ACS, although we can get it, it's not great. And so you really want that a different source for rental vacancy rate.
And then I was just going to scroll back up to this chart. So I haven't done this in the previous SNPs that we've been bringing you for 2023, but we used this chart in our annual report last year, and we'll be filling it out for all of the other subjects as well. But basically comparing the forecast to this year's annual data and then the previous year's data, whether that be an annual report or a comprehensive report. So it's just kind of a cool way to look at it where you can see, okay, you know, median household income, what was our forecast? What was it last year? Has it gone up compared to, is it, you know, exceeding our forecast? And just kind of, yeah, I don't know. It's just kind of a cool table to be able to compare some of that. And then you can also see, you know, the rent percentage versus the income percentage versus the housing, the sales, you know, type percentage, and just kind of condenses it and actually like helps you digest it a little better, I think. So,
Do the parentheses around those numbers imply negative to you?
oh, you know, I'm not sure why they're in parentheses.
Yeah, I mean, it just, to me, it seems like I mean, I am not a data person. I have to tell you
Mhm.
right now that this is not my field, but somehow the parentheses around there imply to me that those are negative numbers when in fact they're positive. So I just
Yeah.
wanted to see if I'm the only one who thinks that.
Yeah, you're right. Parentheses often do indicate negative, right? Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, we didn't do numbers not in parentheses. And so if you had numbers not in parentheses, that would be the positive, and then in parentheses is the negative. But we can definitely take those out because then above it, it says as if it's up or down. In bold there, it says up 57%. We can take those off.
Okay, I just think that in other realms, often negative numbers are in parentheses, so.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
All right, any other questions about housing costs right now? All right, I'm gonna stop.
Oh, John Borofsky.
Yeah, just one quick question. So on the 5+ dwellings, and that's where we had the skews,
Mhm.
are these big complexes? I mean, a big complex that goes in is going to be a 5+ dwelling, right?
Yeah,
It's so, I mean, when I look at 5+ dwellings as an average of $1.7 million, there's got to be a skew when you put a $90 million apartment complex in there.
well, and that's also, well, depends if those are getting sold, or is is the developer developing them and then selling them? But anyway, these are just sales price. It's not like
Right.
the price. So
Yeah, and I'm not sure how that works, but I would be cognizant of that, you know,
they and I think that's why we chose to do a median, because I mean we actually are keeping like arm's length sales in that data. So there are like $1 sales or $100 sales that's in that data. And there's a bunch of caveats that we have about it. But at the end of the day, I mean, I guess.
no, that's great. If you're looking at it that way, that's awesome.
That's sort of why we chose to
I
go
would
with
just be
median.
afraid that some of these really high ones that may change hands
Right.
could really skew a data from year, and that's what we're looking at in annual reports is year to years. And if somebody said,
Mhm.
oh my gosh, it went from 1.7 to $20 million from
Totally.
one year to the next,
Yeah.
we'd want to have that would be one where you'd say, we want an asterisk next to that.
Yes. I agree.
All right. We have any more comments or feedback on the housing? Oh, Sue, go ahead.
I have a lot to say today. I just want to comment that I think it's pretty shocking that we're doing this for the second year already. This is very, very good. This is progress. It's good news. the data is super interesting, I think, and it gives me a sense of how we're going to be able to manage this process in the coming years. I think it's great. Thank you, staff.
Yeah, and I would just say that this top chart was probably the most helpful to me. That's where I kind of did my extrapolations. It's like, oh, okay, 10 years is one year is one year is another. So it was very helpful. And I don't know if that would be, if it would translate, if we have this chart on the income one as well. But
What? Sorry, I don't know if I'm following you.
so the charts that we just went through on the that Heather did before on like the job population and growth data one.
Oh, doing a chart for those as well.
That's a similar chart. I mean, just
Yeah.
it was like,
Well-
wow, this is all in one place on the first page, and it was,
Yeah,
and then it dug down into it down below. For me, it was very helpful.
yeah, I think it's super helpful too. And yes, we are planning to do that for all the data for the annual report.
Okay. I'm not seeing any other hands.
And I think just to close out on the annual, I think that is all of our annual report data, right, Elena?
Okay.
Yeah, well, I know we did it. I think, there's a couple things that we're gonna follow up on. Population, Elena is gonna follow up on the housing sales price stuff. See if we can figure out what's going on. And then the building permit data, I think we had flagged for you that there were some adjustments that were gonna happen, and so we'll do that and do like we did last time and call those things out where they were adjusted. But then the next step would be to bring it to you all. And so we'll talk about that at next steps, but just wanted to make sure you knew that we had looked at everything at this point.
Yeah, to bring you the annual report.
Yeah. Okay, can we move into the ETAC meeting updates?
We can.
Cool. So you may have noticed that for the last couple of meetings that we've had, the public comment format has been revised a bit to still allow for public comment, but basically through a written format where people can email Elena or I, and then we can bring that information to you. That is, we are a department advisory committee, so we're not necessarily required to follow public meetings law, but we are following it. And so we want to provide public comment. But there have been some instances, you may be aware, that people were breaking into virtual meetings and saying extremely disrespectful and inappropriate things, kind of what Zoom bombing, I guess, is what you would call it. And so in trying to deal with that, this was the way we were trying to still allow public comment without having that happen. That it hasn't been a problem. I mean, we haven't received any comments from anyone, and we typically don't at this meeting. That's the other reason it was pretty easy to decide to do that, where it's been a little bit more complicated for some of the actual boards and commissions. So I think at this point, I think we're gonna kind of keep doing that this way until we hear it's a problem. And or we move into the urban growth strategies project. I think with growth monitoring at this point, there isn't a ton to comment on. Again, we want to be available for comment, but there isn't a ton to comment on. But I think when we start talking about new methodologies or, you know, whatever we might be talking about with urban growth strategies and the UGB analysis, we'll have to see if we get more interest of people commenting and decide how we want to that in the format of the meeting. So I just wanted to flag that for you and put that out in the open that we're aware of it, and we thought you might be aware of it, and just wanted to make sure you knew that we're still thinking about it. And it doesn't mean this is how the format is always going to be. It's just how we're doing it right now, and it seems to not be a problem. At least for the EETAC. And then meeting in person, John Borofsky, we want to talk about this. So we had talked last time about, or whenever we last talked about this, that we would maybe try to meet quarterly in person. And every time we have been like, oh yeah, this might work, then there were some challenges with using the city council chambers, and then city council's the city council chambers is going to be moving, and that, you know, and then we were having technology issues because we still have to provide this meeting virtually, even if you all are in person. That is a new public meeting law requirement. So anyway, every time I think we have an avenue for doing it, things kind of go up in the air again. So all of that is to say that I have authorization and technology to go back to the Saul room where we were meeting before, third floor of the atrium. We'll want to make sure that it's a meeting that it makes sense to do that for. And we had talked, I think, last time about you know, if we're, you know, a meeting maybe where we're doing a particularly important vote, or that it might be particularly helpful to have people together, would be a good meeting. I was looking at our schedule, and we definitely could do it in April. We've got 2 meetings identified for April 4th and April 18th. April 4th would be the land use methodology meeting. And so that is part of the urban growth strategies project. And that is taking the land use diagram that is in the comprehensive plan, so it looks like a zoning map, and making it lot specific. And so Zoli and Thea are going to come back to you and talk about the methodology for doing that citywide project, ideally on April 4th. And so we'll want to get an understanding. We'll want to just know if there's anyone that's not going to be able to make that meeting because of our numbers. And then on April 18th, we'll be talking about urban growth strategies, redevelopment analysis, and climate friendly areas. So these are all getting us ready for figuring out where there is development capacity in Eugene related to redevelopment and new or different or revised development incentives that would encourage more redevelopment. And then in May, I think is when we would do the annual report and bring that back to you for a final run through before we send it to council and planning commission. So it feels like May would be a good one, but April 18th could be a good one too. When it's the redevelopment analysis and meeting with our consultants, Echo Northwest. So wanted to get a sense from people's, if anyone knows now that they're not going to be able to attend any of those 3 meetings, and or has any comments or questions about that.
All right, Sue, and then Counselor Ye.
So
And then-
I don't know, I may be an outlier here, but I think these Zoom meetings work really, really well. And I guess I have a concern about pressure on staff to try to make something work in person when it might be really hard to do. So, I mean, I'm supportive of continuing the way that we're going. I think it works really well. I think the meeting is managed beautifully. And socially, I love being together with everybody. It's so much fun and it's interesting. You can talk about other things, but these are different times. So I'm supportive of continuing Zoom. However, if everybody else thinks it's great to be in person, then I'll be there.
All right, thanks, Sue. Jennifer and then John.
Yeah, I just wanted to share that I have a work conflict on the 18th, so I will not be able to be there.
Okay. Sean Borowski.
Well, I agree with Sue that these work really well, but I also have kind of been the one that's pushing for this because I see the advantages of both ways. So I don't know if quarterly is necessary. You know, maybe it's once a year, twice a year type of a deal on topics that really make sense to be able to dig in and look and chew around the table a little bit more. And then I also think that that might be a way to deal with the issue you brought up before about the public comment. You could say, if you want a public comment, in person or whatever, if you do it at an in-person meeting and just say you can't do it by Zoom, if you want to come and talk to us, you have to stand up in front of us. That kind of takes away the anonymity that people have when they Zoom bomb. So you don't get that. So anyways, I'll live with whatever. I just personally, I like in-person meetings more so than Zoom meetings. I'm saying on technical issues like this, I believe these work really well, except for when I can't get into the meetings. But other than that, you know, I really do like the in-person meetings.
I'll jump in real quick and then Heather, I'll go to you. I'm fine either way. My preference though is that if everyone can be either one or the other, I find that the hybrid meeting is really difficult. That's just my personal bias, but I just find that that's just so hard when you have a room full of people, and if you're the person who's virtual, it's just really hard to hear, and if everyone's kind of talking, but of course we're usually a little bit better with not talking all at the same time, but that's my feedback on that. I'm fine either way, but I would just maybe make a request that if everyone could either commit to being in person quarterly or twice a year, or if we all just if we can't, then just keep it virtual. That'd be my 2 cents. But of course I'm one person. And then Heather, you were going to respond.
Oh yeah, I would have to check about if we could, how it works with the public meetings law as far as public comment. Like if we could actually say, well, we're meeting in person, so that is the only way you can give public comment. I'm not sure if we can do that or not with the new law about the meeting also having to be virtually accessible. So anyway, we can follow up on that. But yeah, yes, that's all I'm gonna say.
Okay, Howard.
Yeah, I chair the LRAPA board, and we have hybrid meetings, and it works well for people that can't physically be there. You know, we have some counselors on our board, and so it's convenient for them. So, and these meetings are convenient too. You know, we don't have to travel anywhere. On LRAPA board meetings, you do have the hybrid meetings, and we allow people to come to the meeting to provide public comment, but we also have to provide the ability for them to comment virtually. So, you know, since we're advisory, I don't know how that extends, but at least LRAPA board, we have hybrid meetings, and that includes public comment. And unfortunately, we haven't had anybody Zoom bomb us yet, so we'll see. Okay.
So I would say I would take my request off and let's shoot for the fall, maybe.
And I think we'll keep it in mind too, because, while I was thinking maybe the annual report would be a good one because it's like momentous, right? We're going through the annual report. Is it really the right one to bring everyone to have to travel for when we're probably not at that point? I hope we're not really digging into any data. Probably not, right? So yeah, it's good to think about what is the right, what would be the most helpful, I guess, to be in person for. And when we are dealing with such technical stuff, that can be a hard question. But with our consultants, the other part of it is they're not all locally based. And so that could be another reason, depending on what's going on, that it might make sense to just do it hybrid with them too. So anyway, I hear you, and we'll figure it out, and we'll keep talking about it.
Okay. Howard, did you have anything else? Your hand was still up, or you, okay. Do we want to move into next steps? Or we kind of talked about upcoming meetings, so I don't know if we all just sort of jumbled that together, but
Yeah, so I heard Counselor Ye say the 18th, she's not available. So April 4th, show of hands of anyone that's not going to be able to be available for that. And then April 18th, just Counselor Ye. And then how about, let's just do May while we're talking about it. We have May 2nd. Anyone a no-go? Maybe not. Phil, looks like you don't know yet. Okay. And yeah, this is best guess, obviously. And then May 16th. Oh, sorry, Sue. Were you raising your hand?
I don't know about May 2nd or 16th yet. We have a trip planned, but we don't have it firmed up. So I don't know yet, but I'll figure it out quickly.
Okay, no, that's fine. It's just helpful for planning, because we're on such a tight schedule with the UGS project. This is a great showing. We know that Dennis let us know that he is actually going to have a conflict until mid-May on all Thursday nights. And so he said he's going to be, I think you've probably seen that email, that he's going to try to keep up to speed, but he's not going to be at the meetings. And so that's the other reason we're just trying to determine what our numbers are. So that's great. We're super excited to come to this group about the parcel specific land use map methodology. Some of you will really love that conversation, I think, and it will make it a lot easier for running our buildable lands inventory and for doing monitoring. So I'm pretty excited, and I know Thea's pretty excited about it too.
I'm gonna miss the blob.
No, you're not. We'll get you a framed copy.
Well, no, now the question is, will this parcel specific land diagram have to fit on an 11x7 piece of paper like the blob does?
No. But I mean, we will be able to print it, at 11x17, but ideally, we'll be able to put it on our website. The city has a mapping hub where you can download the buildable lands inventory, you can download the zoning map, and ideally, you'd be able to download the new parcel specific land use map when we get there, so. That was all I had on next steps. We're just trying to be fluid as we're doing the urban growth strategies work. So we appreciate your flexibility.
I did see recruiting in there. I know somebody that might be interested in, they don't have to live in the city, is that correct? Yeah, yes, they do have to live in the city.
They don't have to live
Okay.
in the city.
Okay. Yeah,
Do
because
they live in the UGB?
no, they just moved to the county.
They live outside the UGB. They can apply and yeah.
Okay. I mean, we had people from 1,000 friends that lived outside of that were in the county before.
Yeah, I think one of you lives outside of the UGB, but I don't know if we want to have two people who may live outside of the UGB or not, but yeah, if they're interested.
Well, I mean,
Would it-
they literally just moved out of the city. They were longtime city residents and were interested, but just moved out like last week.
Is it possible to include somebody, and I'm not thinking of anybody in particular, but somebody who maybe owned property or a business in Eugene, although lived outside the city limits?
Is it possible? Yes, I think it is possible. Yeah, it at the end of the day is up to the city manager. But if we had a recommendation that and had reasons why that person would be a good fit on this committee, I think that would be okay.
Yeah, and I think that, we're looking for, diversity in, interests, related to growth, and the willingness to dig into technical details, be able to do an analysis, if there are skills or expertise or advocacy that is related to growth related issues, that's great too. So we are always trying to find that mix. I don't want to say balance, but I want to say mix. I remember one of our early EETAC members was not sure what she could contribute because she wasn't a builder and she wasn't an appraiser, but she was interested, and part of her background was in resource management, natural resource management. And obviously that's related. She had analytical background. She had some demographics that we didn't have represented on the EETAC. So those are, we don't have specific slots, right, for everybody, but just, those are the things that we're trying to think about when we do recruiting and get applications.
I'm recruiting somebody pretty heavily.
Yeah.
And you all would know her, I think.
Yes.
I'll just say it. It's Carol Shermer. And she would be very good. She knows the code.
Poor Carol. You're relentless, John.
Hey, gotta do it. All right.
All right. Well, if there is nothing else at 7:03, I am happy to let you all have about a half hour left or back to your evening. So meeting adjourned.
And no ETAC later this month. This
Okay.
is the one. Okay, great.
All right. No ETAC later this month.
Yeah.
Soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.